Today, we are going to answer a question almost nobody asks. Who, in the United States, has the operational authority to decide which fashion designers enter the historical record as artists, and which fashion designers are quietly allowed to be forgotten? Sit with that question for a second, because it should make you uncomfortable. You probably already have a vague answer in your head. Maybe you think it is the critics. Maybe you think it is the schools. Maybe you think it is the market. Maybe you think it is some loose democratic process where the designers who matter rise to the surface over time and the rest get sorted out in the wash. None of that is correct, not even close. In other artistic disciplines, you can name the Canon formation machinery without thinking. The literary canon is fought over by graduate programs, prize committees, and major university presses across decades. You can read the disputes in the New York Review of Books or the London Review. The classical music canon is mediated by orchestras, conservatories, and recording labels in dialogue with audiences who have been trained to recognize the work over centuries. The film canon is shaped by film schools, major festival juries, the Library of Congress National Film Registry, and a network of archives funded by both public and private money. None of these processes are clean, all of them are politically inflected, but all of them involve multiple competing institutions, checking each other's authority in public over long stretches of time, with disputes you can read about in your morning paper if you know where to look. Fashion has none of that. There are no fashion academics with tenure-track canon formation authority, comparable to the literary scholars at Yale or Stanford or Columbia. There are no fashion prize committees with the cultural weight of the Booker, the Pulitzer, or the National Book Award. There are no fashion archives with the public funding posture of the Library of Congress. The Council of Fashion Designers of America runs an awards program, but its remit is industry recognition, not historical canonization. The fashion magazines do criticism, but criticism is not curation. The auction houses sell pieces, but a sale is not a canon entry. There is no fashion equivalent of the Nobel Committee, the Pulitzer Board, the Cannes Jury, or the Library of Congress Preservation Board. None of those institutions exist for fashion. None of them have ever existed for fashion. None of them are likely to exist for fashion in any future you can reasonably forecast. What there is, instead, is a single institutional mechanism that performs almost the entire canon formation function for American fashion design. And that mechanism sits in the basement of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, on the corner of 5th Avenue and 82nd Street. That mechanism is the Costume Institute. Its primary public-facing operation is the annual Gala on the first Monday in May. And the architecture of how that mechanism actually works, who controls it, and who gets sorted into the canon versus who gets sorted out, is the subject of the next 40 minutes of your life. Here is what you have probably been told about the Met Gala. It is fashion's biggest night. It raises money for charity. It is themed around an exhibition. Celebrities walk a red carpet. Anna Wintour runs it. The themes are sometimes provocative, the dresses are sometimes beautiful, and the internet spends 3 days arguing about who interpreted the theme correctly. That story is not wrong, it is just radically incomplete. Here is what the story leaves out. The Met Gala is not primarily a charity event with a fashion theme. It is the operational engine of canon formation for American fashion, and the people who control that engine are a smaller and more interconnected group than you have been led to believe. The decision about which fashion designer enters the historical record as art is made, in operational terms, by roughly 20 people. You probably cannot name more than 3 of them. By the end of this lecture, you will be able to name all of them. You will understand exactly how the machinery works. You will not be able to watch the carpet next May the same way ever again. I'm going to walk you through this in 10 sections. The first 3 sections establish the architecture. Sections 4 through 6 show you how the machinery actually operates from the inside, with examples. Sections 7 through 9 give you the financial and structural levers that make the whole thing work. Section 10 brings the entire argument back to a single sentence you can carry with you and use the next time someone tells you fashion does not have politics. The proof anchor for everything I'm about to tell you sits inside one document. It is called the Report from the Chief Financial Officer of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It is published every year in the back pages of the Met's annual report. It is publicly available. Almost nobody reads it. In fiscal year 2024, the Met took in $342.6 million in operating revenue. 43% came from gifts and grants, 22% from endowment support, 15% from admissions, 8% from membership, 7%, and I want you to remember this number, 7% came from appropriations from the City of New York, 5% from a line item marked Other. The museum ran an operating deficit of $3 million on the year. It ran a larger deficit of $3.9 million the year before. Those numbers tell you something most people walking up the steps on 5th Avenue do not understand. The Met is, in every meaningful economic sense, a privately operated entity housed inside a publicly owned building on publicly owned land. The taxpayer share is functionally a rounding error, which means that the question of how art becomes available to the American public is not actually a civic question. It is a philanthropic question. It is a question about who is willing to write the checks and what those check writers want in return for writing them. Now hold that frame in your mind. Because inside this already privatized cultural architecture, there is a department that is more privatized than all the others, a department that operates outside even this privatized structure on its own self-funded basis, with its own donor base, its own benefit committee, and its own informal but absolute coordination with the publication that holds the most cultural authority over American fashion in the world. That publication is Vogue. The relationship between the Costume Institute and Vogue is not a partnership. It is not a marketing arrangement. It is not a sponsorship. It is something much stranger and much more consequential than any of those things, and the strangeness of it is what makes this lecture necessary in the first place. The two institutions, one a department of a public-facing museum and the other a privately held magazine, share personnel, planning cycles, donor networks, and curatorial decision-making in ways that have no parallel in any other major American cultural institution. None. You will not find this arrangement at the Department of European Paintings. You will not find it at the Department of Asian Art. You will not find it at the National Gallery in Washington, the Art Institute of Chicago, or the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. It is unique to the Costume Institute, and it has been unique to the Costume Institute for almost 80 years. Watch what happens the next time Met Gala coverage hits your feed. Watch the language of the coverage carefully. Notice that the term fashion canon gets used as if it referred to a settled list curated by neutral experts. Notice that the mechanism producing that list never gets named. Notice that the names of the people actually deciding never appear in the headlines. The coverage is built around the carpet. The architecture behind the carpet is treated as if it does not exist. But the architecture is the story. The carpet is the cover. And the cover gets renewed every May because the alternative, naming the architecture, would destabilize the very arrangement that makes the carpet possible. There is a structural reason the press does not write about this. The fashion press depends on access. Access depends on being trusted by the Institute and the magazine. Trust depends on not asking questions that would damage the arrangement. The press cycle and the gala cycle are not separate. They are mutually constitutive. Every fashion journalist with carpet credentials is, in operational terms, a working component of the system this lecture is describing, whether they know it or not, and most of them do. You are going to leave this lecture with the names, you are going to leave with the dates, you are going to leave with the dollar figures, you are going to leave with the specific designers who are in and the specific designers who are out, and the structural reason why those specific designers are sorted the way they are. None of this is hidden. All of it is visible if you know where to look. Almost nobody knows where to look because almost nobody has ever had the architecture explained to them in plain language by someone who does not depend on the network for access. The architecture I just described, the privatized Canon formation mechanism with the magazine partnership and the donor network and the unique self-funding mandate, is not the result of a recent decision. It was put in place in 1946 in a single boardroom on Fifth Avenue with 3 specific conditions written into the founding agreement. The first 2 conditions are public knowledge if you know where to look. The third condition is the one that explains everything else you're going to hear over the next 40 minutes. And the third condition is something almost nobody outside the Institute itself has ever discussed in print. In 1946, the Metropolitan Museum of Art absorbed a small independent institution called the Museum of Costume Art. The Museum of Costume Art had been founded in 1937 by a woman named Irene Lewison, a theatrical producer and costume designer from a wealthy German Jewish banking family. She believed, with what struck her contemporaries as almost eccentric seriousness, that clothing deserved the same archival discipline that sculpture and painting had enjoyed for centuries. For 9 years, her museum existed on its own, in rented space, scrappy, underfunded, quietly radical in its premise. The merger that absorbed it into the Met was, on paper, a small bureaucratic accommodation, a struggling specialty museum being adopted by a larger encyclopedic one, the kind of administrative consolidation that happens routinely in American cultural institutions during periods of financial uncertainty. 1946 was a year of significant institutional realignment in the United States. The post-war economy was finding its shape. Museum boards across the country were reevaluating their portfolios. The merger looked like ordinary institutional housekeeping. It was not. The Met's trustees agreed to the merger on 3 specific conditions. The first 2 conditions are documented in the public record and have been written about, in passing, in fashion history scholarship. The third condition has not. The first condition was that the absorbed entity would be renamed. It would no longer be called the Museum of Costume Art. It would be called the Costume Institute. The semantic move from museum to institute is not a small one. A museum is an autonomous institution that holds, displays, and interprets a collection on its own authority. An institute is a research adjunct, a subunit, a department. The naming change signaled, in the language of institutional hierarchy, that the absorbed entity would no longer have peer status with other museums. It would have department status inside one museum. The trustees were, in the language of the merger document, demoting it. The second condition was that the new department would have to fund itself. No general operating budget, no share of the museum's endowment, no claim on admissions revenue, no automatic allocation from the trust funds that supported every other curatorial department in the building. The trustees called this self-sufficiency. In operational terms, it was a perpetual eviction notice. The room could be reassigned at any moment if the rent were not paid. And the rent had to be paid every single year, forever, with no possibility of inheritance from the institutional infrastructure of the museum that housed it. You can already see what is happening here. The Met was, in 1946, the most important encyclopedic art museum in the United States. It had been operating on a public-private partnership model since its founding in 1870. The city of New York had given it the land, the building, and a substantial annual operating appropriation. Private trustees had built the endowment and the collection. The two halves were structurally interdependent. Every existing department drew on this shared inheritance. The Department of European Paintings did not have to fund itself. The Department of Greek and Roman Art did not have to fund itself. The Department of Asian Art, the Department of American Decorative Arts, the Department of Medieval Art and the Cloisters, the Department of Arms and Armor, none of them had to fund themselves. They were treated as organs of a single cultural body. They drew on the body's shared bloodstream. The Costume Institute, alone among them, was treated as a tenant. It was given a room inside the house, but it was told it would have to pay its own rent forever, and if it failed to pay, the room could be reassigned. This was not how curatorial departments worked anywhere else in American museum culture, and it was not how curatorial departments worked anywhere else inside the Met itself. It was a unique structural condition, applied to one specific department for reasons the trustees never put into writing. The third condition, the one almost nobody outside the Institute has put into print, is this. The trustees retained explicit veto authority over the Costume Institute's exhibition program at a granularity that did not apply to other departments. I want you to understand exactly what this means, because it is the load-bearing piece of the entire architecture. In the Department of European Paintings, in the Department of Asian Art, in every other curatorial department at the Met, the curators have broad operational autonomy over what gets shown and when. The trustees set strategic direction. The trustees approve major capital projects. The trustees do not approve individual exhibitions on a piece-by-piece basis. They have neither the time nor the expertise. They delegate. The curators run the program. The Costume Institute, from its founding, did not have this autonomy. Its exhibitions were subject to trustee approval at a level of detail that was unique within the museum. The trustees could veto specific exhibitions. The trustees could veto specific designers. The trustees could veto specific themes. They did not exercise this veto often. They did not need to. The fact that the veto existed, on the wall, available, was sufficient to shape every curatorial decision the Institute made for the next 8 decades. And here is where the architecture starts to reveal itself. The trustees who exercised that veto authority were drawn, then as now, from the social networks of New York high society, which meant the social networks of fashion patronage, which meant, in practice, the social networks of Vogue and its parent company. The Condé Nast publishing apparatus had been the central organizing institution of American fashion society since the 1920s. Its editors were trustees. Its trustees were editors. The boundary between the magazine and the museum was, in the operational sense that mattered, porous from the start. You can see this most cleanly in the founding of the Costume Institute Benefit Committee. The Benefit Committee was established in the late 1940s to oversee the Gala and the fundraising apparatus around it. The committee has, since its founding, always included senior Vogue editorial figures. Always. Without exception. Every single year for almost 80 years. Eleanor Lambert, the publicist who founded the Gala in 1948, was a Vogue contributor and a Condé Nast confidant. Diana Vreeland, who joined the Institute as special consultant in 1972, came directly from her position as editor-in-chief of Vogue. Anna Wintour, who has chaired the Gala since 1995, has been editor-in-chief of Vogue since 1988. The figures who have controlled the Canon formation mechanism at the Costume Institute have, for nearly 80 years, been figures whose primary professional authority comes from a single privately held magazine. This is the head fake. Most coverage of the Met Gala treats the museum and the magazine as cooperative but separate institutions. They are not separate. They have never been separate. The 1946 trustees did not just create a self-funding department. They created the only Canon formation mechanism in American fashion. And in the same founding moment, they wrote into the architecture 3 conditions that ensured the mechanism would be operationally fused with Vogue from day one. The self-funding mandate forced the Institute into permanent dependence on the donor networks only Vogue could mobilize. The veto authority gave the trustees, who were drawn from those same Vogue-adjacent networks, ongoing control over what the Institute could show. The naming change demoted the Institute to department status, foreclosing any institutional path to autonomous authority. The 3 conditions, taken together, were the design document for everything that came after. The Met Gala did not develop into a Vogue-coordinated event over time. It was structurally designed to be one from the founding. The architecture was locked in 1946. Everything you see on the carpet every May is the public ceremony of an arrangement that turned 78 years old this year. This matters because almost every public account of the Met Gala treats the Vogue partnership as a recent phenomenon, something that emerged under Anna Wintour's leadership in the 1990s. That account is wrong by half a century. The partnership was not invented in 1995. It was inherited. Wintour did not build the relationship. She intensified an existing one that had been engineered into the institutional bones of the department before she was born. Once you see this, you cannot unsee it. The next time you read coverage of the gala that frames Vogue's involvement as a function of Anna Wintour's personal influence, notice what is being obscured. The Wintour framing makes the arrangement look optional, as if a different editor-in-chief at Vogue or a different chair at the Costume Institute could simply choose to operate differently. They could not. The arrangement is not optional, it is structural. It was written into the founding agreement of the department in 1946, and it has been ratified by every trustee vote, every benefit committee appointment, every curatorial succession, and every gala chair selection for almost 80 consecutive years. So, when you ask who decides which designers become art, the answer is not a person. It is not Anna Wintour. It is not Andrew Bolton. It is not the trustees of the Met. The answer is an architecture. An architecture put in place in a single boardroom in 1946, with 3 specific conditions, the third of which almost nobody outside the Institute has ever named. But naming the architecture is only the first move. The next move is showing you how the architecture actually operates in personnel terms, because the people who staff the Costume Institute do not arrive there by ordinary curatorial hiring. They arrive through a pipeline that is unique among American museum departments, and that almost nobody outside the industry knows exists. To see how the Canon formation mechanism actually operates in human terms, you have to follow the people, not the trustees, the curators, because the curators are the ones who, day by day, pick the exhibitions, assemble the catalogs, frame the scholarly arguments, and write the wall text that determines how the public is supposed to think about each designer. The curators are the front line of canonization, and the curators of the Costume Institute, since 1972, have arrived through a personnel pipeline unlike any other in American museum culture. Start with Diana Vreeland. Vreeland is a name you may recognize. She was editor-in-chief of Vogue from 1963 to 1971. Before Vogue, she had spent 25 years at Harper's Bazaar as fashion editor under Carmel Snow, working alongside the photographer Richard Avedon and the art director Alexei Brodovich. She was, by the late 1960s, the single most powerful fashion editor in the world. She was also, by 1971, in trouble. The new corporate leadership at Condé Nast had concluded that her editorial vision was too eccentric, too expensive, and too out of step with the commercial direction the company wanted Vogue to take. She was forced out. Within 12 months, she had been installed as special consultant to the Costume Institute. The position did not exist before her. It was created for her. It gave her broad curatorial authority over the Institute's exhibitions, with a title that was deliberately vague about her formal place in the museum's hierarchy. She was not a curator, she was not a director, she was a consultant. The looseness of the title was a feature, not a bug. It allowed her to operate inside the Institute with editorial sensibility, not curatorial training, and it allowed the Institute to draw on her Vogue-built network without formally collapsing the boundary between the two organizations. You need to sit with what just happened, because it is a structural move that has no parallel in any other major American museum. The Department of European Paintings does not, when it loses a curator, replace that curator with a magazine editor whose primary professional credential is editorial taste. The Department of Asian Art does not maintain a special consultant position for retired editors of Architectural Digest. The Department of Greek and Roman Art does not invite the editor-in-chief of Smithsonian Magazine to direct its exhibition program. The personnel pipeline at every other major curatorial department in American museum culture runs through art history, graduate programs, museum studies, conservation training, and a documented history of scholarly publication. The Costume Institute pipeline does not. Vreeland's exhibitions transformed the Institute. She mounted 12 major shows during her tenure, every single one of them at a level of theatrical ambition that no previous fashion exhibition in American museum culture had ever attempted. The Balenciaga Retrospective in 1973, the Romantic and Glamorous Hollywood Design Show in 1974, The Glory of Russian Costume in 1976, Vanity Fair, a treasure trove of the Costume Institute in 1977, The 18th Century Woman in 1981, the Yves Saint Laurent Retrospective in 1983, which was the first major museum retrospective of a living designer at any American institution, and which set the template for everything the Institute would do for the next 40 years. These exhibitions established what we now call the Met Gala model, a single designer or theme treated as worthy of major scholarly attention, presented in a theatrical environment with cinematic lighting and dramatic mannequin staging, paired with a major fundraising event that drew the social and editorial elite of New York into the museum on a single coordinated evening. Vreeland did not invent the gala. The gala had been founded by Eleanor Lambert in 1948, but Vreeland fused the gala to the exhibition in a way it had never been fused before. The party became the launch. The launch became the press cycle. The press cycle became the institutional brand. And the institutional brand was, increasingly, indistinguishable from Vogue's editorial brand because the editor running the institute was the editor who had shaped Vogue itself for the previous decade. Vreeland died in 1989. Her successors at the institute were, on paper, more conventional museum professionals. Richard Martin, who took over as curator in charge in 1993, came from a fashion writing and academic background. He had edited Fashion Theory Journal. He had taught at Columbia. He had written books. Harold Koda, who succeeded Martin in 2000, had trained as a curator at the Fashion Institute of Technology and had served as associate curator at the Costume Institute under Vreeland in the 1980s before leaving for FIT and returning. Both were trained museum professionals with documented scholarly records. Both had institutional autonomy from Vogue in a way Vreeland had not. And both, in the inner circles of fashion history, are remembered as having tried to maintain that autonomy and as having, by the time of their departures, effectively lost that fight. This is the part of the history that almost never gets discussed publicly. Martin's tenure from 1993 to 1999 is remembered by people who worked at the Institute during those years as a period of constant tension between the curatorial program Martin wanted to mount and the Gala-driven, Vogue-coordinated programming the trustees and the new Gala chair preferred. Martin died in 1999, at the age of 52, of a heart attack that several people who knew him have described as the consequence of unsustainable institutional pressure. Koda's tenure from 2000 to 2015 is remembered as a period of gradual accommodation in which the Institute moved further and further toward the Vogue-coordinated model that Wintour, who had become Gala chair in 1995, was pushing for. Koda's tenure is now remembered, among insiders, as the last period when the Costume Institute had meaningful curatorial independence from Vogue, even if that independence was contested every year. Andrew Bolton succeeded Koda as curator in charge in 2015. The arrangement Bolton has built with Anna Wintour over the past decade has no precedent in the Institute's history, and that includes the Vreeland period. Bolton and Wintour jointly select themes, they jointly approve the honorary chairs, they jointly oversee the gala production, they appear together at announcement events, they are photographed together at exhibition openings. Their working relationship is so visible that fashion press routinely refers to the gala's themes as Bolton-Wintour productions, with no quotation marks. The exhibitions are conceived in coordination with Vogue's editorial calendar, with the magazine's coverage running in parallel with the institutional rollout. The catalog photography is shot by photographers who also work for Vogue. The exhibition design is supervised by figures who also do editorial work for Vogue. The press kits are coordinated through the Met's press office in dialogue with Vogue's communications team. The two institutions, on the question of the Costume Institute's annual exhibition program, do not have separate operations. They have one operation, executed in two buildings, with the same working group of people moving between them. This is not how curatorial decisions are made in the Department of European Paintings. It is not how they are made in the Department of Greek and Roman Art. It is not how they are made in any other major American museum department. It is unique to the Costume Institute, and it is the operational pivot point on which the entire canon formation question turns. Because here is what this pipeline actually means. The decision about which designer gets a major Met retrospective is made by a partnership between the chief curator of the Institute and the editor-in-chief of a privately held fashion magazine. There is no academic peer review process comparable to what happens before a major painting retrospective. There is no public consultation. There is no broader curatorial committee with structural independence from this partnership. There is no equivalent to the editorial board of a university press, the prize committee of a literary award, or the festival jury of a major film event. The decision happens between two people, in coordination with a small benefit committee, with input from the trustees who hold the residual veto power. And that decision determines, year after year, which designers enter the American fashion canon and which designers do not. You should know the names of the people in this pipeline. You should know that Diana Vreeland, who set the template, came from Vogue. You should know that Andrew Bolton, who runs the Institute today, came from the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, but has spent his entire American career inside the Costume Institute, and has built his entire programmatic vision in collaboration with Wintour. You should know that Anna Wintour, who chairs the Gala, has been editor-in-chief of Vogue since the year Ronald Reagan left office. You should know that the Benefit Committee, which technically governs the Gala, has always included senior Vogue editorial figures and currently includes them. You should know that the trustees of the Met, who hold the residual veto, are drawn from the same financial and social networks as the major Vogue advertisers. The next time you read coverage of a Met Gala theme announcement, watch for a specific tell. The announcement will refer to the Institute's curatorial decision-making in the passive voice. It will say things like, the theme was selected, or the designer was chosen, or the show was organized around. The active subject of the sentence will be missing. This is not an accident of style. The passive voice is doing structural work. It is hiding the personnel pipeline I just described. It is making the decision look like an institutional outcome rather than a personal one. It is making the canon look like it formed itself rather than being assembled by two people in coordination with a magazine. Once you start watching for this passive voice, you will see it everywhere. And once you see it everywhere, you will understand that the language of fashion canon coverage has been engineered across decades to obscure the very mechanism this lecture is about. But the personnel pipeline is only half the architecture. The other half is the process by which themes themselves get selected. And the process is timed, calibrated, and commercially aligned in ways that would surprise you if you have only ever encountered the public-facing version of how a Met Gala theme becomes a Met Gala theme. The clearest way to see how the canon formation mechanism actually operates is to look at how the annual theme gets selected, because the theme determines which designers get historicized that year, which exhibitions get mounted, and which slice of fashion history gets cultural amplification across the entire global press cycle. If you control theme selection, you control canon formation. And theme selection is the most engineered, most coordinated, and most insider-managed process inside the Costume Institute's entire annual operation. You probably believe, if you have only encountered the public-facing version of this, that the Met Gala theme is a curatorial choice. The chief curator surveys the field of fashion history, identifies a designer or theme that deserves scholarly attention, and the Institute mounts a show around that subject. The gala then happens around the show. The dress code reflects the theme. The fundraising follows the curatorial work. Substance leads. Spectacle follows. That picture is, in operational terms, almost completely backwards. Theme selection happens roughly 24 months before the gala. This is not public knowledge. It is industry knowledge. People in the press cycle know it. People at the major houses know it. People in the Institute's adjacent network know it. Nobody outside that network knows it, because nobody on the inside has any commercial reason to make it public. The cycle is timed to align with 3 external calendars simultaneously: Vogue's editorial calendar, the Paris and Milan couture and ready-to-wear seasons, and the major commercial repositioning moments of the houses likely to underwrite the show. A theme is not chosen because of its scholarly merit alone. A theme is chosen because of its scholarly merit, plus its commercial alignment, plus its editorial photography potential, plus its capacity to attract co-chairs who can sell tables. All 4 of those criteria have to align. If the scholarly merit is high, but the commercial alignment is wrong, the theme gets shelved. If the commercial alignment is right, but the editorial photography potential is weak, the theme gets postponed. If the photography is strong, but the co-chair pipeline is uncertain, the theme gets pushed to a different year. Theme selection is, in operational terms, a 4-variable optimization problem solved by Andrew Bolton and Anna Wintour in dialogue with a small group of trusted advisors over a roughly 18-month window. Let me show you what this looks like by walking through 3 specific cases. These are the 3 most successful Met Gala exhibitions of the past 15 years. Each had real scholarly merit. Each was also, in operational terms, a coordinated commercial event. There is no contradiction between those 2 things. They are the same thing. Case 1, Karl Lagerfeld, A Line of Beauty, 2023. Karl Lagerfeld died on February 19, 2019. He was 85 years old. He had been creative director of Chanel since 1983, of Fendi since 1965, and of his own eponymous label since the 1980s. He was, by any reasonable accounting, the most commercially significant fashion designer of the second half of the 20th century. The decision to mount a major retrospective came in the months following his death. The exhibition opened in May 2023, 4 years and 3 months after he died. What happened in those 4 years and 3 months is the part you need to see. Chanel, the house Lagerfeld had transformed into a global commercial force valued at approximately $20 billion, was navigating its own major commercial repositioning. Virginie Viard had succeeded Lagerfeld as creative director. The transition was difficult. Chanel's commercial position was, for the first time in 3 decades, genuinely uncertain. The brand needed a major cultural moment to consolidate Lagerfeld's legacy in a form that supported the new creative direction without dwelling on the loss of the old one. The Lagerfeld retrospective at the Met served exactly that function. It was scholarly. It was beautifully mounted. It was reviewed favorably by the fashion press. It was also, in operational terms, the largest single brand equity consolidation event Chanel has ever participated in. The exhibition was underwritten in significant part by Chanel itself. The catalog was produced in collaboration with Chanel's archives. The opening gala raised significant funds for the Institute. The press cycle around the exhibition lasted from the announcement in May 2022 through the closing in July 2023, 14 months of continuous high-profile coverage timed almost perfectly to support Chanel's transition under Viard. The scholarly content was real. The commercial alignment was also real. They were the same thing. Case 2, China. Through the Looking Glass, 2015. The exhibition opened in May 2015 during the most aggressive expansion of luxury market penetration into the Chinese mainland in commercial history. Every major European luxury house had a financial interest in repositioning its brand for Chinese consumers. LVMH, Kering, Richemont, Chanel, Hermes, all of them were actively building flagship retail in Shanghai, Beijing, Chengdu, and Hong Kong. The Chinese luxury market was, in 2015, projected to double over the next 5 years. The exhibition served simultaneously as a scholarly meditation on the influence of Chinese aesthetics on Western fashion across more than 2 centuries of cross-cultural exchange, and as a coordinated cultural overture to a market the houses underwriting the gala desperately needed to enter. The exhibition was magnificent. The scholarship was rigorous. The catalog, edited by Andrew Bolton, ran to 360 pages and remains one of the most cited fashion exhibition catalogs of the past decade. It was also, in operational terms, the soft power tip of the spear for a coordinated luxury industry effort to legitimize European fashion houses inside Chinese cultural discourse at exactly the moment those houses were betting their next decade of growth on Chinese consumers. The two functions did not conflict. They reinforced each other. Case 3. Heavenly Bodies, Fashion and the Catholic Imagination, 2018. The exhibition was mounted with active cooperation from the Vatican, which loaned 31 pieces of papal vestment from its sacristy collection. This was unprecedented. The Vatican had never loaned material of this scale or significance to a secular cultural institution outside of Italy. Securing the loan required a multi-year diplomatic negotiation. The negotiation was conducted, in operational terms, through the social networks of major Catholic donors on the Met's board, several of whom had long-standing relationships with the Vatican commercial entities that license religious imagery for fashion use. The exhibition's underwriting included contributions from Versace, which had been licensing Catholic iconography for its collections since the 1990s. The scholarly content was real. The commercial alignment with houses that profit from religious imagery and fashion was also real. The Vatican secured a soft power moment in New York. The fashion houses secured cultural legitimization for their use of religious imagery. The Institute secured a record-breaking exhibition that drew over 1.6 million visitors, the most in the museum's history. 3 exhibitions, 3 perfect alignments. The scholarly merit was real in every case. The commercial coordination was also real in every case. And here is the part the public-facing version of this story never says out loud. The exhibitions where the alignment is not present do not happen. The exhibitions where a designer is scholarly important, but where no major commercial inheritor exists to underwrite the show, do not get mounted. The exhibitions where a theme is intellectually rich, but where the photography potential is weak, do not get mounted. The exhibitions where the co-chair pipeline cannot be assembled do not get mounted. This is not corruption, it is design. The Institute's self-funding mandate from 1946 requires it to optimize for commercial alignment whether the Institute's curators want to or not. The Institute cannot mount a major show without underwriting. Underwriting comes from houses with commercial interests. The shows that get mounted are the shows whose commercial interests align with the curatorial vision. Over time, the alignment becomes inseparable from the vision. Now look at what does not get themed. There has never been a major Costume Institute retrospective of Patrick Kelly, the Mississippi-born designer who was the first American admitted to the Chambre syndicale du prêt-à-porter in Paris, and whose use of vintage black memorabilia made him one of the most theoretically interesting designers of the 1980s. There has never been a major retrospective of Willie Smith, the founder of Willie Wear and one of the most commercially successful black American designers of the 1970s and 80s. There has never been a major retrospective of Stephen Burrows, the architect of American color blocking and central figure in the Battle of Versailles in 1973. There has never been a major retrospective of Anne Lowe, the black American designer who designed Jacqueline Kennedy's wedding dress. What do these designers have in common? They have no surviving commercial empire. Patrick Kelly's house dissolved after his death from AIDS-related illness in 1990. Willie Smith died of AIDS-related illness in 1987, and his label did not survive him. Stephen Burrows' commercial business has operated at varying scales, but has never had the underwriting capacity of a Kering or LVMH brand. Anne Lowe died in 1981 with no commercial inheritor. None of these designers' estates can underwrite a Met retrospective. None of them have houses that buy tables at the Gala. None of them have current creative directors who can be co-chair candidates. They are absent from the Canon, in operational terms, because their commercial inheritors cannot pay the entry fee. This is the belief shift I want you to register. You probably walked in believing that fashion canon formation, however imperfect, is at least driven by curatorial judgment about which designers matter. It is not. It is driven by a 4-variable optimization in which curatorial judgment is one variable and commercial underwriting capacity is the binding constraint. When the binding constraint disqualifies a designer, no amount of curatorial enthusiasm can override it. The Institute cannot mount a show it cannot fund. The funding comes from where the funding comes from. The canon is shaped accordingly. The next time you see a Met Gala theme announcement, ask yourself one question. Which house is repositioning right now? The answer to that question will, in 9 cases out of 10, predict the theme more accurately than any reading of curatorial intention could. But theme selection is only one mechanism. The next mechanism is co-chair selection. And co-chair selection is the place where you can see most clearly that what looks like cultural recognition is, in operational terms, fundraising labor in disguise. The honorary co-chair role at the Met Gala is, in public coverage, presented as a kind of cultural recognition. A celebrity is named co-chair. Their name appears in the announcement. They walk the carpet first. They are photographed beside Anna Wintour. The press treats the role as an honor. The celebrity treats the role as an honor. The public reads the role as an honor. Everyone involved in the public-facing version of this story treats the co-chair selection as an act of cultural conferral. The Institute saying to the celebrity, "You matter to us," and the celebrity saying back, "I am pleased to be in your company." That is not what is actually happening. The honorary co-chair role is, in operational terms, a sales position. Each named co-chair is expected, by informal but absolute custom, to mobilize their personal social network to fill at least one table of $350,000 and ideally 2. They are expected to make introductions to potential donors. They are expected to attend pre-gala dinners hosted at Vogue offices where they are introduced to potential patrons and where the Institute's development staff observes which patrons are most responsive to which celebrities. They are expected, in short, to perform fundraising labor in exchange for the cultural visibility the co-chair role confers on them. This means co-chair selection is reverse engineered from the donor base. The co-chairs are not chosen primarily for their cultural significance, although that is the public framing. They are chosen because their social networks contain the kind of high net worth individuals and corporate executives who can write the largest checks. A Hollywood actress whose social network is primarily other actresses is less valuable as a co-chair than a Hollywood actress whose social network includes hedge fund managers, technology chief executives, and luxury retail executives. The selection process favors the latter. You can see this if you know what to look for. Consider the historical pattern. Co-chairs across the past 2 decades have included figures like Beyoncé, Jennifer Lopez, Sarah Jessica Parker, Blake Lively, Tom Brady, Gisele Bündchen, Donatella Versace, Pharrell Williams, Bradley Cooper, Lin-Manuel Miranda, Alicia Keys, Zendaya, Bad Bunny, Penelope Cruz, Rihanna, Michael B. Jordan, Chris Hemsworth, and Dua Lipa. Each of these figures has, in addition to their public-facing celebrity, a documented social and commercial network that includes major financial industry figures, major luxury retail executives, major technology leaders, or major sports franchise owners. Each can be deployed as a fundraising bridge into specific donor pools that the Institute could not reach through Vogue's editorial networks alone. Tom Brady is a useful case study because the inversion is most visible in his selection. Brady was named co-chair in 2017. The fashion press treated his selection as surprising. Why was a football player chairing a fashion event? The answer, once you understand the operational logic of the role, is obvious. Brady's social network at the time included the ownership groups of multiple major sports franchises, the partner network of his investment firm, the executive layer of his nutrition and apparel businesses, and the wealthy technology founders he had cultivated through his Boston area connections. He was not selected because he was a fashion icon. He was selected because he could deliver 1 or 2 tables of $350,000 in donor commitments from networks that the Institute could not access through its Vogue-adjacent channels. Now, consider also who has not been chosen as co-chair, despite obvious cultural significance. Many of the most culturally significant musicians, athletes, and actors of the past 3 decades have never been named co-chair. Some have been attendees, occasionally, and at varying levels of integration. Some have been excluded entirely. The pattern of absences is informative. Figures whose celebrity is intense but whose donor networks are narrow are not chosen. Figures whose cultural significance is high but whose social position is non-elite are not chosen. Figures who would draw attention but who could not deliver dollar volume are not chosen. The co-chair role is reserved for figures who can be operationalized as donor pipelines. The selection logic then has downstream effects on which designers get cultural visibility. The co-chairs are dressed by the houses that are buying tables. The houses that are buying tables are the houses with the deepest commercial relationships with Vogue. Those houses are the ones whose creative directors are likely to be candidates for future Met retrospectives. The co-chair on the carpet, in a custom couture piece from a major house, is not just a beautiful person in a beautiful dress. They are a working component of the Canon formation system, performing the public-facing labor that justifies the next round of donor cultivation, that finances the next exhibition, that determines which designer enters the American fashion record. There is a specific phrase that gets used inside the Institute's development office by people I have spoken to who have worked there, and the phrase is room temperature. It refers to the gala's operational atmosphere. The room temperature has to be right. The temperature is set by the co-chairs. The co-chairs determine which donors feel comfortable attending. The donors who feel comfortable attending determine which checks get written. The checks that get written determine which exhibitions get mounted. Co-chair selection, in operational terms, is room temperature management. It is not cultural recognition, it is climate control. The Institute does not say this out loud, ever. The press does not report it. The co-chairs themselves often do not fully understand it, although the older and more experienced ones absolutely do. Anna Wintour understands it perfectly. The benefit committee understands it perfectly. The trustees understand it perfectly. The development office runs the entire operation around the principal. And the celebrities, even the savvy ones, often do not realize until their second or third gala that the role they accepted as cultural recognition is, in operational terms, an unpaid fundraising appointment that they were specifically chosen for because of the donors in their phone contacts. There is a second piece of insider language you should know. Inside the development office, the donors who can be reached only through specific celebrities are called bridge donors. A bridge donor is a high net worth individual whose check the Institute cannot get directly through Vogue's editorial networks, but can get if the right celebrity makes the introduction. Bridge donors are tracked by name, by net worth, by industry, and by which celebrities have access to them. The list is not public. It is not even shared widely inside the Institute. It is held by a small number of senior development staff, and it is the operational asset on which the Gala's growth across the past 2 decades has been built. Co-chairs are selected, in operational terms, based on which bridge donors they can unlock. The closer a celebrity's network is to a previously inaccessible bridge donor pool, the more valuable that celebrity is as a co-chair candidate. Now here is the part that connects this back to the Canon formation question, which is the spine of this entire lecture. The system creates a feedback loop. Co-chairs are chosen for their donor networks. Their donor networks support the Gala. The Gala funds the Institute. The Institute mounts retrospectives of the designers whose houses dressed the co-chairs. The retrospectives canonize those designers. The canonization elevates the houses commercially. The elevated houses can then dress the next round of co-chairs at higher levels of investment. The loop reinforces. Designers who are not in this loop do not get canonized through it. There is no other loop available to them. The Costume Institute was the only major canon formation mechanism for American fashion. If you are not in the loop, you are not in the canon. If your house cannot dress the co-chair cannot wear your work. If the co-chair cannot wear your work, the press cannot cover your work as a Met Gala moment. If the press cannot cover your work as a Met Gala moment, you do not generate the cultural attention that justifies a retrospective. If you do not generate the cultural attention that justifies a retrospective, the Institute cannot make the case to the trustees for mounting a show on you. If the Institute cannot make the case for mounting a show, you don't enter the canon. The mechanics are recursive and they are exclusionary by design. You should ask yourself a specific question the next time you see a list of Met Gala co-chairs announced. Who is selling the tables for this celebrity? The answer is the part nobody publishes. But once you start asking the question, you will be able to read the Gala the way the people running it read the Gala. You will be able to see the donor networks behind each name. You will be able to predict which houses will dress, which co-chairs based on which houses need access to which donor pools that year. You will be able to read the carpet the way it is actually being constructed inside the Institute's development office, rather than the way it is being marketed to you in the press. This is the second belief shift. You probably walked in believing that the celebrities at the Met Gala are there because they are stylish, important, or relevant. They are there because they can sell tables. The carpet is a fundraising mechanism wearing a publicity dress. And the carpet is being read by the people running it as a quarterly performance review of which celebrities are still